Performance art as a laboratory of the soul. And I'm going to start with a bit of a disclaimer here that I am not sure if I should have called this section performance art. Maybe I should have just called it art as a laboratory of the soul. I think it's just reflecting, honestly, my own bias. So I make performance art and I spend more time researching performance art, so I've got more examples in that area. I have reasons to think that performance is potentially particularly apt for exploring ideas around selfhood and personhood and so on. However, I can see no reason why performance art would be the only avenue for experimenting with these ideas within the arts. So at the start of this presentation, I mentioned that artists use all kinds of media and tools to enter an engagement with the world. Clay, paint, cameras, etc. My final proposition of the day is that an artist's own person can become their artistic medium. And I'm deliberately being a little vague about what exactly I mean by the artist's person, because, as we have begun to see, person itself is not a widely understood or agreed upon concept, and person is actually quite an elusive idea that seems to take on different meanings depending on who you ask. For example, in the eyes of the law, a corporation counts as a person. In law, a person is something that has rights and responsibilities. You can sue Coca-Cola because the law understands Coca-Cola to be a person who can be held accountable for its actions. In slightly archaic English, person could mean your body. You could say, I had no money on my person, and it would mean that you had no money in your pockets or attached to your body. In psychology, a person or personality is a collection of traits or thoughts, and feelings and behaviours that persist over time and place. And psychologists debate to what extent these traits are intrinsic or environmental, or how fixed or changeable they are. And the emergence of artificial intelligence complicates this matter of what a person is further. They are the first man-made systems that successfully mimic behaviours previously only performed by what we call persons. So people rightly wonder, can AI be a person in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of folk intuition, in the eyes of psychology, etc.? To put it in a nutshell, the more we try to answer the question of what a person is, the more elusive, strange, and non-obvious it gets. And yet, everyone watching this, and myself, we are all persons. And that fact seems quite simple to accept. Even though I am not quite sure what to include under the banner of my personhood. Is it my body? Is it my brain? Is it my consciousness, which I cannot seem to locate in any particular place? Is it the sum of my life experiences? Is it my passport and personal documentation? Is it my character? Is it my social network? Etc., etc. Even though I cannot easily delineate the boundaries of what actually is my person, I am able to summon it in one word: I. I suppose I is a kind of placeholder, a temporary stand-in for what we mean by person, for the day we one day figure it out. Like a blinking carrot on a screen, it holds the space for a person without really saying what it is. The benefit of experimenting with the idea of the person as the medium and subject of an artistic practice is that we all have one. It is immediately available. So we can take a look at a few artists and see how they may have played around with inserting themselves into the work, and in so doing experiment with where and when personhood is located. In Cindy Sherman's Untitled Film Stills, each photograph reanimates a cluster of cultural stereotypes: the ingenue, the working woman, the housewife. And Sherman's body becomes a host for alternative memes, performing the way they flow through her as a temporary site of expression. Genevieve Guénard is a biracial American artist who inserts herself into the work to create a kind of oscillatory reading of identity, highlighting how subtle differences in visual cues can tip the reading this or that way. In Gillian Waring's series Album, she creates hyper-realistic masks of her family members' faces and photographs herself wearing them. Nikki S. Lee is a Korean artist who, between 1997 and 2001, engaged in a kind of anthropological art project. She also inserts herself into the work. Here she is in the white top, second from the left in the front there. Her process during these projects was to enter different social groups, usually a kind of subculture or ethnic minority group, and then she would spend a few months getting to know people in that group, making friends with them. Increasingly, she starts to dress and behave in ways to fit in with the group and participate in their activities. And the artworks, the results of these extended stays within these environments, the results are simply photographs taken by someone else of her with her new friends. So this is from the Hispanic Project. These are from the Skateboarders and Yuppie projects, the Punk Project, the Exotic Dancer Project, the Tourist Project. So let's read some of the points she makes about this series, and these extracts, these texts, are taken from an interview in a book about the projects. On the left we've got quotations from Nikki S. Lee, the artist herself, and on the right we've got some quotations from Russell Ferguson, who wrote the introduction to that book, so some secondhand commentary there. So let's see the first paragraph from Nikki S. Lee on the left there. She says, "My work is really simple actually. I wanted to make evidence, as John Berger calls it. I always feel like I have a lot of different characters inside, and I was curious to understand these things. I wanted to see some sort of evidence that I could be all those different things." Okay, so staying with different people and getting to know them as a way of unearthing parts of herself that were already there, potentially. And then the second quotation from Nikki, "That's the underlying concept. Other people make me a certain kind of person. It's about inner relationships and how those really address the idea of identity. People are interested in how I can alter my attitude or appearance from one project to the other. Each one brings out those certain characteristics. When I show the work, I prefer putting a lot of photographs together. If I show just one project or one photograph, people probably don't get what I'm doing. You can't have one without the others, they're all connected." So then we move on to Russell Ferguson's writing about Nikki, and the text goes, "An egomaniac, one critic called her. I'm interested in myself," she disarmingly and honestly informed an interviewer. Yet her interest in herself is defined almost exclusively through her relationships with other people. Her photographs are all about those relationships. And then the second quotation, "Despite the seriousness of her preparation and the apparent success of her disguises, Lee is on one level never playing a role at all. It might even be said that in her transformations, she is pragmatically testing out a potentially continuing identity for herself. Her activities could be seen simply as a self-conscious process of making friends, learning to fit in with people she likes, reflecting their style. The ultimate implication is that she might just stay in one of these groups with one of the personae she has created." So this links back to some of the psychological theories of the contextual person, the person that is shaped and almost triggered into being by social cues. Now, I am aware, and I do find it curious, that all the artistic examples I've given you so far come from women artists, and then that all of them are using photography and themselves. Maybe that's not a coincidence, but I'll leave you to think about that for now and move on to the next section, which has to do with this self-estrangement task that I gave you. And in the live seminar, we briefly stopped here to discuss how that task went, because this is now a kind of segue into telling you a little bit about my work. So this method that I shared with you before the seminar, this actually stems from a method that I use in my own practice, and it comes from a video performance series that I've been making for over 10 years called the One Woman Empathy Circus. And here I take on a variety of different characters and then I improvise stories from their perspectives. So each video is unscripted and spontaneously improvised in front of the camera. I'll just give you examples now of different characters I've been through this practice. So in this work, Voxels of Truth, this conceptual artist is offering a shortcut through millennia of Western philosophy by introducing a three-dimensional unit with which to measure truth. And there she is in the Tate Modern. This video is about a revolutionary leader looking to strike a healthy work-life balance. So she's left the revolution behind and she's at the beach. Here is a suburban housewife. As she's chopping this celery, she's just woken up to the gendered nature of her socialization and she's considering now what to do with this knowledge. Homo horizontalis is about a group of people who prefer to live horizontally rather than vertically. And Pseudo is a performance in which I concentrated on emptying myself of my own personality in order to leave room for a fictional character to come and possess me. When she arrives, she lands in my body in a panic, knowing that she hasn't got long to live. When I return, she'll be gone forever. So I'll play you a short excerpt from this one.
And I haven't existed before, but I can hop into a body at any given time and exist for that little moment to play her vocal cords as if they were a harp. It's possible through the conduit of language. And so I will take some time to speak, if that's okay. Though I know that when this conversation is over, that's it for me. It's only through the conduit of language that I can exist. I'm from a sort of cloud, you see, a cloud which people invent together, the real ones, the people with faces, and I love matter. I love the matter that makes up faces, but I'm not composed of matter. I'm composed of speech bubbles that people have floating above their heads, and so I had an opportunity, you see, and I took that opportunity to become materialized for some time or other. And I'm not sure if I even will ever be able to have another appearance, to be able to make it on the stage like this again. I only know that I can do it for a short time because she'll lose patience with me, you see, and she can't keep me there for too long. It would be overstaying my stay, so to speak, and so I do what I can to take this opportunity as fast as I can and make the most of it.
Originally, when I started doing this, I just thought, I like storytelling, I like acting. Making these videos was a way for me to entertain myself with eccentric characters and quasi-science fiction stories that were kind of like thought experiments in fictional form, a little bit like Jorge Luis Borges' style, if you know his work. So it's only after years of doing it that I started to notice that this practice was probably an extension of my daily habit of code switching or frame switching. Everyday life taught me that the line between performance and authentic being was not always so clear, and I hadn't yet read Erving Goffman's sociological study of this. So when my friends accused me of faking my accent, the strangest thing was, I didn't really know myself whether I was faking it or not. Existing in a social space always takes some degree of effort, some kind of striving to be understood. It involves going somewhat out of one's way to present an impression before an audience. Is this performance or authentic self-presentation? In all honesty, I wasn't certain about the status of my own authenticity as a cultural chameleon shape-shifting in and out of social groups. But such ambiguities and puzzling observations as we encounter in our own lives are the perfect kinds of things to bring back to the laboratory of artistic practice. So, my video performances became a means of stretching the bounds of my character and exploring the edges of my authenticity. I had become my own test subject. Two observations that struck me as surprising ever since I began this practice were the following. Firstly, sometimes I surprised myself with how utterly authentic I felt when I was performing characters that seemed like they should be far away from how I usually socially present. So they could be speaking in completely different accents, be very extroverted in a way that I wasn't usually, or professing like really strange ideas that seemed kind of bonkers. And yet I could inhabit certain characters like this that seemed like they should be really far away from who I am. But when I was in that space, it felt very authentic. It didn't feel like pretending. So that was one observation. Another was that in almost every video where I convinced myself that I was this new character, at some point during the video, I start having ideas that have never occurred to me before. It was as if the adoption of a new persona had the power to tilt the entire landscape of my mind. The characters became quite a powerful mental tool for this reason. I could begin to consult the characters in my practice on questions to which I did not have the answer, because they were coming up with things I'd never thought of before. So I want to end at this point because my only goal really with this presentation today was to hint at how performance practice could become a kind of laboratory of the soul. With this example from my own practice, I wanted to show how taking puzzling questions which actually often simply crop up in daily life, and plugging them into the laboratory of art practice can actually throw back new surprises, new questions, and potentially even new findings. So it's almost like your art practice is a living thing, and you can ask it questions, in this case about authenticity and pretending and performing and being. So you can ask it these questions, and then it starts talking back. So the practice starts throwing things back at you. So it can be quite exciting and dynamic in that sense when you frame the practice as a laboratory rather than as something that is going to produce predetermined outputs, I suppose. No, instead, like an artistic practice can be something that really serves you. It's not there to serve other people, to produce products for other people, but it could be there literally as some kind of oracle, if that's not stretching it too far. A kind of place you go when you have uncertainty, doubt, ambiguity, things that are really puzzling and strange about the world. You take that and you give it to your artistic practice. While I personally don't have time to go into it now, the work I did through the one-woman empathy circus did lead me to pursue a PhD research project where I continued to ask my practice questions about authenticity and character. And my practice ended up teaching me a whole new perspective on what character actually is or could be, phrased in terms of shared formulas and memes. So if anyone is interested in this, you can find this theory of character. I didn't really share with you so much my own theory of character, but you can find this in an online lecture series I created on the subject. So that's us done really with this first theoretical component of session 1. After this followed Craig Mulholland's presentation, Assemblages of Being. And in week 2, we kind of leave all this theoretical stuff bubbling in the backgrounds of our minds, and we actually move on to do some practical work, which you'll see is very connected. So I will give you a series of performance tasks to try out, and Craig will work with you on the idea of manipulating the voice through software, and hopefully some of the things that we talked about in our theoretical week are echoing in the background while you're doing this more practical, intuitive stuff. So I hope you enjoyed.